What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Nemo Propaganda here, and today we're going to check out the Heaven 11 Billie amp. This thing has been on my radar for a long time. I met the owner at Axpona recently. His name's Itai, super cool guy. I walked into his room and I was like, hey brother, I've wanted to check out your amp for a long time. I got a small YouTube channel. What do you think? He looked me square in the eye and said, let's do it. Super cool. As soon as I got back, I shot him an email. He sent me the review sample right away. So I've had this amp in my home for a little while now. I've used all kinds of speakers and I'm really looking forward to telling you guys about it. So without further ado, let's get those main specs on screen so you guys can check that out. I'll tell you about some standout features, what makes the amp unique or special, what it sounds like, what speakers I connected to it, how it compares to some other amps in and around this price. Then we'll wrap up the video. So standout features first and foremost. Guys, did you know the Billie amp was this small? This is a really compact amp, and I was not expecting that because the power spec is quite high. 120 watts a channel by 2 at 8 ohms, 215 by 2 at 4 ohms. That's a lot of power for a small amp, and guys, it barely gets warm. This thing runs cool. So that was pretty cool. Some other unique things they do is this amp is a little bit customizable aesthetically. You have a silver and a black option for the case, and these knobs are customizable. You can buy different knobs on their website. Some of them they're made out of real wood, or you have some real stone options. Really cool to see. And there's different tube options as well. I got the standard tubes and the gold tubes, and I'm going to tell you about both of them. Another standout feature is going to be the casework. This is beautiful casework. The top plate and front plate appear to be milled out of a solid piece of aluminum and look absolutely beautiful. And the last standout feature is going to be just the feature set itself. This amp's got a lot in it. You want to use phono, you could do that. It's got a DAC with 2 digital inputs. You have a wireless input by way of Bluetooth, 3 analog inputs, subwoofer output, love to see that, as well as a headphone output. So small amp, lots of power, lots of features, beautiful casework. We're winning so far. What does it sound like? So I will tell you what it sounds like with the standard tubes, and then I'll tell you what it sounds like with the gold tubes, and then I'll tell you which one I liked the most. So with the standard tubes, the treble region was going to mostly neutral, good detail, good air, good separation, very open area and expansive sounding. If you watch a lot of Thomas & Stereo describes that as the modern tube sound. Moving down to the mid-range was warm, just a little bit, not a lot, just a little bit warm, a little bit tonally rich, decent holographics, decent dimensionality, just decent at all the tube things. Again, if you watch Thomas & Stereo, he describes that as the modern tube sound. Moving down to the bass region, very confident bass. The amp definitely gives you just a little bit of extra meat on the bones in the bass region. It sounds good. It sounds confident. It's not overdone in any way. And it had no problem driving even my hardest to drive speakers at any volumes that this room could handle. 215 watts at 4 ohms, guys. 120 watts at 8 ohms. That's a lot of power. Amp had no issue with the standard tubes. Let's talk about the gold tubes real quick. Again, going back to Thomas & Stereo, if you've watched a lot of his content, the gold tubes are what Thomas & Stereo has historically described as the old tube sound. The top-end treble using the gold tubes was a little bit rolled off, a little bit warmer, a little bit smoother. Still open, still airy, still detailed, but just easier on the ears, a little bit more romantic, a little bit more enjoyable, a little bit easier to listen to. I liked that quite a bit. Moving down to the mid-range, it became warmer, more holographic, still stayed open, still stayed, having good separation and things like that, but it became more holographic, warmer, more organic, more tonally rich, more depth, and just holographics overall. Very much enjoyed that. Moving down to the bass region, I didn't notice a big bass difference in the bass region from standard to gold tubes. My guess is the bass region is mostly being handled by the just amount of wattage the amp has. Regardless of the tube complement, really good control, power, and speed in the bass region. No issues. So Which one did I prefer? I preferred the gold tubes. I did. That's what I liked. I think the gold tubes is a well worth it upgrade. It's a very inexpensive upgrade, and I highly recommend it. Unless you're looking for that more modern tube sound that is more detail focused, the gold tubes, that's what I expected out of a tube hybrid. So that would have been my pick. If I didn't already say it, this is a Class D tube hybrid, and that's going to be one of the reasons why it's able to stay so compact, have a lot of power output, still run cool to the touch, and just have phenomenal bass control overall. So what speakers did I use? I tried a lot of speakers that I had here, guys. Bucard S400 Mark IIs, CSS Crichton 1 TDXs, Triangle Comet 40th anniversaries. And this is what I found. This amp paired with every speaker I had without any issue. There's only one speaker I have here that this amp is not going to work well with, and Heaven 11 tells you on their website not to do this. The Billie amp is not compatible with speakers that are high resistance and very high sensitivity like Zoo Audio. So as much as I love the Zoo DWX, Heaven 11's own website told me not to try that combination, so I didn't try that combination, guys. I'm sorry. It is what it is. Everyone knows Class D amps generally like being at 4 ohms or 8 ohms, not much higher than that. So not too surprising, but just in case any of you guys are like Zoo Audio fans, the Billie amp is not for you, unfortunately. But the CSS Crichton 1 TDXs that are very hard to drive and have extremely strong bass, no freaking problem. The Bucard S400 Mark IIs, no problem. The Triangle Comet 40th anniversary, no problem. Every speaker I connected to the Billie amp sounded absolutely fantastic with good, strong, confident bass that was controlled very nicely. So I've told you what it sounds like. I told you standout features. I told you about speaker pairing options. Let's do some comparisons so I could help give you guys some context to everything I just said, because I understand it is really hard to understand what something sounds like, and comparisons generally help solidify those things. So let's compare the Billie amp to something similar in price, the Bucard i150. That amp is $2,500 at full price, or if you're an existing Bucard customer, it's $2,000. So pretty close in price, kind of identical, if you will. Using the standard tubes, the two amplifiers are fairly similar in the treble region, being mostly detail-oriented with their delivery. Neither one was too forward or anything like that. I'd say the i150 is ever so slightly more on the forward side of neutral compared to the Billie amp with the standard tubes. Moving down in the mid-range, the Bucard i150 is going to lean cooler. It's going to be more analytical in the mid-range, where the Billie amp, even with the standard tubes, is warmer. Moving down to the bass region, guys, both amps are Class D at their core, have tremendous power capability. Both amps could drive the woofers of speakers without any issues. Both amps could drive really difficult loads without any issues. I did notice the Billie amp ran cooler than the Bucard i150 when I had that review sample. Switching over to the gold tubes, really big difference between the two. With the gold tubes, the Billie amp is just a warmer presentation overall. It's darker in the treble, still very open, still very airy, just very different overall. Personally, I'd say this. The person that's going to go for the Bucard i150 is going to be the customer that wants that more analytical, detailed sound. You're a detail customer. Detail is the most important thing to you. Go for the Bucard i150. If you're a customer that cares more about tonality, warmth, body, holographics, that's where the Billie amp is going to shine, and that's who should buy the Billie amp in that comparison. So with that out of the way, let's move over to another tube hybrid, the Pathos Classic 1 Mark III. Now that amp is considerably more money at $3,495. It's a Class AB tube hybrid. The Heaven 11 is a Class D tube hybrid. Both have respectable power. The Billie amp has a little bit more at 215 watts at 4 ohms. The Pathos Classic 1 Mark III has 130 by 2 at 4 ohms. So at almost twice the price, listen, the Pathos Classic 1 Mark III is going to give you a lot more refinement in that treble region. It's a little bit smoother without losing any detail. It's going to have a slightly better air, much better separation, honestly. And that's the difference between the two, regardless of the tube complement. That's what happens when something's almost twice the price. That's not to say the Billie amp is a slouch. The Billie amp does have good air, good space, good separation, and things like that. It's just the Pathos is damn near double the price, guys. Moving down in the mid-range, both amps are good in the mid-range. Both amps are going to lean slightly warm, have good holographics, very open, very expansive, and things like that. I found the two amps holographics to be about on par with each other. The almost double the price Pathos was just a little bit more natural sounding in the mid-range. Moving down to the bass, both amps had good, strong, confident bass. Both amps have a good amount of power available on hand. The Billie amp seemed to be just a little bit more confident in the bass region, like ever so slightly boosted, if you will, whereas the Pathos seemed just a little bit more linear. At the end of the day, the two amps are absolutely fantastic. The difference in performance with the Pathos being slightly better with its mid-range and treble is simply going to come down to its price. Pathos can use much more expensive parts in that Mark III, the Classic 1 Mark III, because it MSRPs for like 75% more money. So that's that comparison out of the way. Let's wrap it up with one more. Let's go with the full tube. Let's talk about the Prima Luna Evo 100. That's $2,800, so it is $800 more money. Being a full tube only amp, it does have substantially less power available. Both amps are on the smaller side. All three of these amps that I've compared the Billie amp to so far have been fairly compact amps, by the way, with really nice casework. The Prima Luna Evo 100 in the treble region compared to the Billie amp with the standard tubes, fairly similar, mostly detail focused. You switch that Billie amp to the gold tubes, much warmer, a little bit darker with its presentation. Now it's focusing more on tonality and richness and being organic. So I like the Billie amp more with the gold tubes versus the Prima Luna with its standard tube complement. Moving down to the mid-range, both amps were nice and holographic. You would expect the Prima Luna to be a lot more holographic, but that wasn't my experience actually. I found both amps have similar holographics. Sure, the full tube, Prima Luna was ever so slightly more holographic with ever so slightly more depth and dimensionality to it, but it wasn't as big of a difference as you would expect with the Billie amp being a Class D tube hybrid and the Prima Luna Evo 100 being a full tube amplifier. Moving down to the bass region, things are really different here. While both amps are juicier in the bass region, the Prima Luna cannot even come close to getting speakers as loud as the Billie amp. Even at lower volumes like 75 dB, the available power of the Billie amp is very obvious compared to the Prima Luna Evo 100. When I reviewed the Prima Luna Evo 100, I never felt like it sounded strained per se, but when you compare it to something like the Billie amp that just sounds so effortless in the bass region, the Prima Luna Evo 100 does start to sound strained once you cross over 75 dB. Another big difference between the two amps was volume control when using their included remote controls. I found the Billie amp to be much more granular than the Evo 100. And with the Evo 100, I had a hard time getting my volume to the perfect point when using the remote. So that's that comparison out of the way. It's this simple. At $800 more money, the Prima Luna is just for the customer that wants a full tube amp. I do think the Billie amp might be the better buy. It's $800 less money. It can drive speakers much harder, especially speakers that are harder to drive. I don't recommend the Prima Luna Evo 100 with harder to drive speakers unless you're a very low volume listener. I think if you're just getting into tubes, I'd say the Heaven 11 Billie amp is probably where I'd lean over the Prima Luna Evo 100. But if you're like super into tube amps already and you've got just like tons of tubes and you're into tube rolling, don't get me wrong, like with full tube integrated amps, like tube rolling can really change the sound. I'm just doing this comparison with its standard tube complement. So with that out of the way, this is what we've got. The Billie amp is a compact, high output, high feature set amplifier that's reasonably priced. It's got a good sound to it, especially with the gold tubes. That's my recommendation. Again, unless you're a detail-focused customer. The gold tubes, they just bring that tonality that I find more enjoyable. I find to be more just organic, sweeter, warmer, just more pleasurable, if you will. If you got any questions, guys, this YouTube channel does have a free Discord server. You can also ask your questions in the YouTube comments section. And until next time, take care.